friends, Heidi here from Rain Country. God is good all the time, and I'm here for yet another 5 unexpected things to stock up on or just simply have on hand to get you through hard times or just even day-to-day life. Now, this is actually video number 4. Even though I initially only intended to do one of these videos, it's now turning into a series. And a lot of it's just for fun. A lot of it is just to get you to consider and think about some things. It doesn't mean you have to put all of these things up or have all these things on hand. It's just more suggestions that you can consider if you have not done that already. Oh, and by the way, I'll be putting the link to the playlist in the description box down below. So let's get to the list of today's 5 things, starting off with boot and shoe laces. So I'm not positive, but I think in one of my previous videos, I mentioned when you see some of your favorite shoes, especially if they're more garden related, work related, and so on, and they go on sale, get an extra pair or 2 and have them on hand like I've done with my Kizik's. However, along with that, it's a good idea to make sure you have some extra types of boot and shoelaces on hand, because for some people, this isn't a case with my Kizik's because they're slip-ons, even though they may have laces to adjust the fit. They're not getting tied and untied all the time, but with something like boot laces, especially work boots and the eyes and the hooks, they can wear out rather quickly. And so we've always kept boot laces on hand for Patrick's boots because the laces would wear out many times before his boots would wear out. So always having some on hand, he'd be getting ready for work and snap, there goes another boot lace, and then he would just change it out real quick. So very important to have those on hand. Now, one option you can consider, like I have right here, is just some paracord. So this is the 550 weight paracord, and we have a couple of spools of this on hand, and I think I might have even mentioned it in another one of these types of videos. But this makes for good boot laces right here. Your main thing is you're going to have where you cut it, you're going to have a little frayed section. This can be melted with a lighter, and you can even tie a knot in the end. But this does hold up for a very long time. I have found many uses for the paracord, and we in the garden, in just about everything. Mostly I use it a lot in the garden for all kinds of stuff. Then the other thing, and anyone who's been following me for any length of time will get this one right away, but if you're new to my channel or new to this whole idea, a handheld brake bleeder pump like this one. Now, these types can usually be bought in a full kit. There's different types of brake bleeder kits, but the ones that look like this, I oftentimes will have a link to this exact one, but they're all virtually the same, and that link often it's out of stock. But where you're going to find these is in an automotive section in your local hardware store, as well as on Amazon. So why do I have one of these on hand? Well, aside from being able to be used as a brake bleeder, which Patrick has had to do at least once or twice, I use this predominantly for vacuum sealing jars. And so I use this particular tip. There's different types of configurations you can use, but I use this tip along with the food saver tops, which is going to be important to also have on hand, but I'm still counting this as just one point. And then I'll put this on top of whatever jar, regular mouth or wide mouth. Hold this in place. I'll put a video clip here so you can see, and then set the brake bleeder pump on the counter and pump with my whole arm until the needle stops moving, and now my jar is vacuum sealed. So this is a great way to put up things like fatty foods such as nuts and seeds, any kind of dehydrated goods, fruits, vegetables, herbs, and more. Anything is dried, or even storing nuts and seeds that I do not soak and dehydrate. I just buy them, put them in the jars, and then vacuum seal them into the jars. And that keeps them from turning rancid and keeps them fresh for years to come, as long as your seals will hold. Oh yes, and this also, I have another one that's attached to the vacuum chamber that Patrick makes. And so when I'm sealing jars that aren't a standard canning jar, that don't have a lid that this would fit over, then I use the vacuum chamber to seal that with. And I just have a separate one for that so I can keep it permanently attached to that. It just makes it easier. Okay, number 3 is writing utensils. So you never know. I tend to like when I take notes for videos, I like to write them, and I like to write them in pencil so I can erase them if I make a mistake or change my mind. And so I have like 2 boxes of these pencils on hand, as well as a lot of regular ink pens and Sharpies and other types of permanent markers. And so I go through a lot of pencils because pencil is my favorite thing to use when I'm taking notes. With erasers, I also buy bulk package of good pencil top erasers, as well as having your separate eraser. But the pencil top ones I prefer because that's one less thing to misplace if it's on the pencil. So we've become so dependent on electronics to do a lot of stuff for us, but you don't know if you might be in a situation where being able to write things down rather than type things up is going to be important. So having a way that you can write letters, write notes, write recipes, I believe is really important. I believe that's important right now. And, not losing the ability to even write or read in cursive, I think is also important, though we've not put enough importance on it because of modern technology. But I think it's still a good thing to know. You don't know if you're going to come across an old letter written by your great grandmother and written in cursive, and you won't know how to read it. So I do believe that's important. But yes, having some kind of writing utensils on hand, whatever your favorite type is. So that was number 3. Number 4 is making sure you have a good supply of seeds. This includes saving your garden seeds, learning how to do this process, no matter if it's from your herbs, from your vegetables, your fruits, your annuals, even your perennials, because you never know if something, even if it's a perennial that comes back every year all the time, you never know if for some reason that plant just gets old and up and dies, like, losing our blueberries. So having seeds, or even knowing how to take cuttings off of such perennials and making new plants, making starts, like mints, for instance, are very easy to make starts from. And I'm glad that I knew how to do that when it looked like I'd lost almost all of my oregano, but managed to find a few little sprigs that I was able to dig up and save and even separate out and make more new plants out of that, so I can get another nice patch of oregano growing for me. So with your seeds, now this can, you can stock up on purchase seeds that you buy. Just know that over time, there's a lot of different seeds that will become less viable over time. Some can stay viable for years and years, while others will lose their viability and their germination rate over time. So having a good stock is important, but also having a good way to store them. But most importantly, as you're growing your garden, learning how to save them each year. Every year that when I'm growing tomatoes, every year, I save seeds from those tomatoes, just in case, every year. And I'm glad that I do that. And that will apply to anything that's really important for you to continue to keep growing every year. Now, because a lot of times I'm growing pumpkin or spaghetti squash at the same time as zucchini, I usually still like to buy fresh seed every year. But if I had to, I would save the seeds or just grow one thing each year out of those, of anything I can cross-pollinate, and then maybe make some kind of mutt squash that may have a terrible taste. Some can turn out really good, but some can turn out pretty bad. So keeping your seeds as pure as possible when it comes to that can be important too. But yes, garden seeds are going to be important to get you through hard times, and knowing how to garden. So even if you just have a little tiny garden patch, a pot of something somewhere, learning how to take care of these things, how to start them, also goes hand in hand with this, having that knowledge. It is very, very important. Sometimes you'll have people that will simply think, oh, I'll put up a bunch of seed and I'll just wait until I absolutely have to put it in a garden. And that's really not a good approach, because there's so much to learn about gardening. And you might say, well, I'll have YouTube or books, but even then, that's not always going to be applicable. And in fact, I would say in most cases is not going to be applicable to your own specific situation, your climate, your soil, and so on. So learning how to work with what you got as soon as possible is important, so you're going to have the experience, even if you just start with one thing and keep it small and keep it simple, and it's in a pot because you don't have room to put in a garden. And then number 5 actually goes right along with this one, and it can apply to having chickens, having a garden, and so on, but that's keeping, if you can afford it, put up different types of fencing and have it on hand, because you'll always find ways to use it. So we have different types of fencing. One of my favorite things, it's less expensive than getting permanent fence, but more expensive than buying other types of fencing, but will last longer than some of that plastic net fencing, which I have that too. But I like to use the dog pens that you can make in any shape, but I turn those into fences, and they come in several different heights. I have bought quite a number of those of varying heights over the years. And so they have become very handy in helping to keep grandbabies contained into certain areas, keeping dogs contained into certain areas or out of certain areas, or even keeping babies out of certain areas, like the year when Jace was still pretty young, but he was crawling around, and I was canning some carrots out on the deck, and I was afraid he might get too close and burn himself. So I used that fencing to make an area to keep him away from that, so he wouldn't touch the canner while it was hot. You'll find many uses. Trust me, you will. I am constantly, and we just recently put in a new garden area right up against our backyard fence, where we took out some old racks that were for firewood and moved them to the side yard, and we're going to start putting firewood there instead of up against the fence. And now that fence is going to have a row of berry plants all along there, fruit plants, perennials, blueberries, figs, boysenberries, and raspberries. But I need to keep the chickens out of there, especially since that stuff's new and they can too easily dig it up, or when the berries start coming on, and the chickens will eat all the stuff off of it. So we've got some of that fencing I had on hand that I was able to stretch across there and keep them out of that area. So sometimes you just might get a wild idea and something comes up and you realize, oh, I need this. So having that on hand, along with things like polycarbonate pieces, those also come in handy. Those also can make a barrier of sorts if you need to, but we keep quite a bit of that on hand to be able to make shelters out of, to be able to make areas that are more protected, to keep the plants warm, whatever. So if you can afford it, especially if you're seeing any of this stuff go on sale, I recommend putting some of this stuff up, because you may decide to expand your gardens, you may decide to get chickens, and you want to have ways to keep your chickens out of your different garden areas and so on. I do highly recommend that. What I'm going to do is I'm going to link to the video I did a couple years ago on the many ways to use dog crates, and I'll put that in the description box down below. Since then, I've purchased a lot more of the taller ones, and now that I have chickens that are more apt to hop fences, and that has helped in a lot of areas, because I have a couple chickens that will hop those shorter fences, where my Buff Orpingtons never did that. But anyway, that's my 5 things for this particular list. I may or may not have more of these coming out, but at least I have 3 prior ones. If you haven't seen them, please go check out that playlist and put your thoughts and ideas in the comments down below. And thanks for watching. Take care and God bless.